So what does this latest wrinkle mean?
I mean, this is something, as you know, Emily, that came out about a year ago when kind of Qualcomm sort of threw this around, said there was some suspicion it had about what Apple was up to. Now it's saying, hey, look, we've got the evidence. We want to add this to a case that we've already got going on. Clearly, this is another attempt to ratchet up the pressure on Apple and try to force Apple to see things its way.
Is the evidence compelling?
We don't know. I have to see. I mean, that's for the judge. The judge has to initially decide whether she's even going to allow that to be considered, or whether there's going to have to be more time for more evidence to be, for discovery and everything else.
We sat down with Qualcomm CEO Steve Mollenkopf for Bloomberg Studio 1.0. The full episode is airing tomorrow, but take a listen to what he had to say about this suit with Apple.
I think there's probably no better opportunity and partner for Qualcomm than to work with Apple. It makes sense that the technology leader in mobile should be partnered with the product leader in mobile, and those things tend to work out. But the way that we think about the business is eventually you get the disputes figured out and you move on into a different period, and I hope to be in that period according to the schedule we've already laid out.
Ian, how do you square that optimism with the filing today and the bitterness?
Yeah, I mean, as you remember from the conversation, what he said was sometimes these things get settled on the courtroom steps. So the basic strategy on both sides, Apple's doing just the same thing, which is as much pressure as you can, force the other side to blink, then we all smile, shake hands, and walk away friends.
What's the chance they're going to smile and shake hands? What's the chance of a settlement?
We haven't seen either side come close to blinking as far as our reporting can show yet.
So what else are we waiting for here?
I mean, the trials have to begin. The juries have to take a look at the evidence. The judges have to show roughly which side might be winning, which might not be winning. Maybe there's an injunction, maybe iPhone shipments stop, who knows? I mean, something like that, which forces either side to take this a bit more seriously.
Either way, at this point, Qualcomm isn't in Apple's new phones.
Correct.
Would we expect that Apple would go back to Qualcomm chips in later generations, or is that done?
I mean, if you believe what Steve told us, then it's basically a case of if we design a better chip, if we can produce something that Apple has to have, they'll find a way to putting it back in there. At the moment, it looks like a distant prospect, though. Right?
How big are the consequences for Qualcomm if they lose?
The consequences are already baked in terms of what it means for their chip business. For their licensing business, though, the consequences are absolutely huge. This is a business that drives the majority of their profit. Without that profit, their R&D suffers. Without that R&D, their ability to push that chip technology forward is also challenged.
What if Apple loses? It's a much smaller issue for them.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I mean,
but what does Apple lose?
Yeah, basically Apple has to go back to perhaps using Qualcomm, and it has to pay, billions of dollars in these licensing fees, and
which they're already paying.
Well, they've stopped paying, right? But they've said that they've put the money in an account. Basically, I mean, it's not chicken feed, it is billions of dollars. But for a company the scale of Apple, it's not going to make a huge difference. Why
do you think Apple is taking this to the wall, given its size and scale and how, in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, simple answer is why not, right? They can afford to win, lose or draw. They can afford it. So why not put as much pressure on your opponent as you possibly can?
So when do you expect to see a resolution? I mean, Steve had told us that within this year, there was a possibility he saw of coming to terms.
Right. So we've got these cases coming up in Germany, these cases coming up in China. Those courts have the ability, in theory, to ban the import or export of the iPhone. Clearly, if you're Apple, that is not something which you want to be facing. So assuming that there's a kind of a nudge in that direction or a nudge in the opposite direction, then maybe one side has to cave in when those decisions start to materialize.
So how optimistic are you that something could happen this year? You've been covering this industry for 2 decades.
Yeah,
you know better than anyone, except for maybe Steve Mollenkopf.
Qualcomm tends to win, right? Its lawyers, by and large, have won over time.
Why?
They would argue that it's because their intellectual property is so cast iron, so fundamental to what's going on, that as soon as they can get in front of the right format, the right jury, the right judge, they'll win.